Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and I am the host of the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, as well as the blackbraziltoday.com blog, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. So this is a piece that I definitely want to get into because it's something that I know has been growing for some years now, and I've touched on it, occasionally. And I've always just wondered, how is this whole thing going to play out? Because, I've seen what's going on in the United States. And, I'm not one to assume that because something happens in one place, it's going to absolutely happen the same way in another place. But at the same time, I know that a lot of politics are global. You can no longer look at things as just something that's local or national. So for years, I've heard about uh, how the Black movement in Brazil has grown. Obviously, as I've been following the racial situation in Brazil since the year 2000, I've seen a lot of things. And there's a lot of things that caught my eye when I first started studying the situation in Brazil, because it was like I saw a lot of similarities with what was going on in the United States. And I was just curious about what some of those nuances and some of those differences were. It's supposed to be a situation that's completely different, but it's totally not. When you look into what's going on in Brazil, if you already have the background in the US, then a lot of stuff that you'll see going on in Brazil will be similar. You'll recognize it. So where are the policies for Black men? Sociologist says government Department of Racial Equality focuses on only Black women, ignoring the plight of Black men. So I became aware of this piece that came out in Brazil's top newspaper. I think it was either earlier this week or last week. Folha de Sao Paulo is like Brazil's top newspaper. It's kind of like Brazil's answer to the New York Times. I didn't know about this article until this guy shared it on Instagram. And I says, whoa, the headline caught my eye. So I says, okay, let me see what's going on here. The author of this it wasn't an article. It was an article, but it was an interview with an Afro-Brazilian sociologist. I've talked a little bit about his work on the blog. If you go over to the blog, the Black Brazil Today blog, you'll see some of his work. Let me see. This is it right here. So these articles here are either written by him or they feature some comment from him. The Black man and the myth of male privilege, Black men in masks, reactions of police and people to COVID-19 and people wearing masks, present Black parents, mestissaging, race mixture, harmony and whitening, who's afraid of the Black man, what is it to be a Black man in Brazil, reaffirming the struggle beyond the dehumanizing stereotypes and subordinate masculinities. So this author, this sociologist, he does a lot of work on what they call masculinidades negras. Okay. There are a number of men in the United States talking about Black masculinities, and you have a few going on in Brazil as well. So let me get into today's article, today's video, because he had a lot of intriguing things to say. This is not anything that's new to me, because as I said, if you follow the situation in the United States, well, can we expect that it's going to be completely different, or is it just going to be similarities in there? Okay. So let me get directly into this particular interview that he did. Like I said, within I think it was probably last week he did this interview. Okay. So this is the sociologist Henrique Restier, recently did an interview with the Folha de Sao Paulo newspaper. And basically what he's saying is that the Ministry of Racial Equality is hostile to Black men. So what does he mean by that? That's why I want to get into his interview. Okay, before I even get into it, these are some of the topics that I want to talk about. First of all, this touches, on something that has affected me as well, because for those of you who have followed the blog, you know that my blog, Black Brazil Today, started off for many years as Black Women of Brazil. But for various reasons, I felt the need that I had to move away from the name of that. And that's because all types of stuff that was coming out, people often were confused. They believed that the blog was created by some Black Brazilian women. Some people actually took offense to that. Like, no, it's not Black Brazilian women. It's actually a Black American male who's behind that blog. I've explained this before. There's some other things that came up later on. And it just pushed me over the edge. I had been considering for years that I needed to move over and change the name of the blog, which is what I did. I eventually settled on Black Brazil Today. Um, but originally, I had named the blog "The Black Women of Brazil" because I noticed that it seemed like Black women were the ones who were really organizing, in terms of the race situation. They had their own groups. They had websites where people would contribute articles every day. They had their ear. They had the government's ear. It just seems like, Black women was rocking it out. They were leading the charge for the acceptance of natural kinky curly, what they call cabello crespo, kinky curly hair. So, I was impressed with that. I'm like, wow, Black women are out front in this. In 2015, they had the first Black Women's March. They met with the president of the time, Dilma Rousseff, who was the first female president in Brazil. So I saw a lot of things, but as I kept going on, there's always two sides. And I remember some years ago, I used to participate in this WhatsApp group called Homens Pretos, which means Black men. And this had to have been some of the most militant brothers I had ever met in Brazil. The Movimento Negro, the mainstream Black movement in Brazil, is kind of on the moderate side. So I always wondered, where is that more militant activism? Okay. And I found it in this group of Black men. They didn't hold back on some of the stuff that they were talking about. They analyzed feminism, they analyzed the racial discussion, the politics of the left, a lot of stuff that these guys were talking about. I kind of lost touch with them because they kind of broke up the group. But knowing those guys let me know there's always going to be that other group that's far more radical than the mainstream group. In the United States, if you remember, like, they had the what they call the moderate civil rights movement. Then you get a little bit more militant because you had like the Nation of Islam with Malcolm X. Like, okay, if you don't want to deal with MLK in the more moderate wing, you're going to get to the more radical Black politics with Malcolm X and Nation of Islam. Later on, the Black Panthers will come along. So there always has to be these different facets of the movement because, some people are not always going to agree on the ideology. Okay. I'm looking forward. I need to connect with those brothers again because I learned a lot from them. One of the things that you'll always hear in an argument for policies for Black Brazilian women is always that Black women are on the bottom of the racial hierarchy. They are on the bottom of the social pyramid, what they would say. There was a graph that they would always use, and they will always show the order of the social order was always white men on top, white women, Black men, and Black women. So automatically, we believe that Black women are automatically on the bottom of that pyramid. And for years, okay, I listened to that side, but then somewhere along the line, I started listening to other people who had a different view of that. It's like, no, it's not necessarily true that Black women are on the bottom. It just depends on how you look at it. It's something that we've heard coming out of the United States as well. How do you analyze between Black men and Black women, which group is doing better and which group is doing worse? It just depends on which statistics you're looking at. So then there was another piece that came out that says, do Black men have privileges? Let me see if I have that thing right. So this is what the question is in this article right here: the Black man and the myth of male privilege. So in this article, the guy is just going on, this is all what I wrote here, but some of the questions that they were asking: do women really earn less money than men simply because they're women? Are most men potential rapists? Is it true that there is a femicide going on in Brazil? Do men really seek to oppress women? Are women really the more oppressed gender? And this is an article that's if we're going to look at this honestly, then we do have to look at both sides. This shouldn't be a contest to see who's more oppressed. It's just going to depend on what stat you're looking at that says, okay, if white men and white women are on top of that hierarchy, then who comes next between Black men and Black women? It's not a question that it's not as easy as people might think it is to answer that question. When you look at the murder rates of Black men in Brazil versus, just from street violence and then from, being killed in police operations, it's hands down it's Black men being killed in the streets every day. Statistically, it always shows that 95% of the people that's killed in Brazil on an annual basis, they're always going to be men. And within that men category, Black men are the ones who are most likely because their body's going to be falling on the ground, being the victim of some violence, a bullet or whatever. So who's really oppressed? I mean, do we need to analyze? Do we need to argue whether black men or black women are more oppressed here? So then you also have what's called the Ministry of Racial Equality. This is set up as part of actually part of the Brazil's federal government. It's responsible to plan, coordinate, and execute public policies for the promotion of racial equality to fight against racism on a national level. The incumbent minister of state who heads the ministry right now is Aniele Franco. I'm going to get into that in a minute. This is from the Wikipedia page. It was created under the name of the Special Secretariat of Politics of Promotion of Racial Equality of the Presidency of the Republic. It was created on March 21st of 2003 during the government of the first time Lula da Silva became president. The first chief minister was Matilde Ribeiro. She was a social worker and a university professor. I'm sorry. So these are the people who have been at the head of this Ministry of Racial Equality: Matilde Ribeiro. You have Edson Santos, Eloy Ferreira, the late Luisa Baijos. Then you have Nilma Lino Gomez. And you notice she was only in there from January of 2015 to October 15. Okay. Seems like that department disappeared for a while after they ran Dilma out of office. I'm not sure if that was a little bit before, a little bit after, but so Nilma Lino Gomez was, she was this minister of racial equality under the Dilma government. But then what happened was that some people call what happened to Dilma Rousseff as a coup d'etat to get rid of her. But as you see, there's a gap of time between 2015 to 2023 when another person was brought in as the minister, the person heading up the Ministry of Racial Equality. So, Brazil had those, after they removed Dilma from the presidency, then you had Michel Temer, who he was her vice president. He completed her term, and then Jair Bolsonaro came in. And obviously under those years, under a more right-wing conservative president, it seemed like that department of the federal government kind of disappeared. Now with Lula being elected for the third time, now you have Aniele Franco. Now, if maybe you don't know who Aniele Franco is, but she is the sister of Marielle Franco. Marielle Franco made headlines some years ago. I think it was 2018, March 14th, 2018, when she was assassinated in like a professional style assassination in Rio de Janeiro. She was a city councilwoman. Apparently, she ruffled up some feathers. They took her out. It's a crime that still hasn't been completely resolved. Still hasn't been completely okay. Who's responsible for this? Who ordered this hit? So Aniele Franco, who is the head of the Ministry of Racial Equality, she is the head of that department. She has a very intriguing story. She studied in a couple of historically Black colleges and universities in the United States. And so then she has this position within Lula's government. Okay, it's called the MIR, which means the Ministry of Racial Equality is what it's called. Okay, now Aniele has had some issues. Some people who are on a more conservative side see that they don't really like her. They don't like what her politics are about. They think she wastes a lot of money. That's not even what I really wanted to talk about today. I wanted to talk about what the sociologist Henrique Restier had to say about this Department of Racial Equality. His question is this department looking out for Black people in general, or is it just a front to promote the advancement of Black women? Okay, so that's what his argument is. This is a question that he asked in a recent interview. So does he have a point here? So in this picture here, Minister Aniele Franco, she announces programs and investments during a breakfast with Black parliamentarians. Okay, so you see there's all women with her. So let's get into what does Henrique Restier have to say? I mean, what is his argument? Let's take a look at this. So this is a brief summary of the interview he did with Foliage in Sao Paulo about a week ago. This piece is from Caroline Saiter is the name of the author of the article. So sociologist Henrique Restier shares on his social networks not only moments from the routine of his two daughters, Manuela and Ana Flor, but also reflections on the place occupied by Black men in Brazil. With a PhD in sociology from the Institute of Social and Political Studies from the State University of Rio de Janeiro, Restier uses the virtual space to address questions such as, is the Ministry of Racial Equality becoming the Ministry of Black Women? And ain't I a man? Alluding to the famous phrase by Sojourner Truth, an African-American abolitionist and activist who gave the famous Ain't I a Woman speech in 1851 directed towards white women. In an interview with Folha de Sao Paulo, Restier said that Black men have been harassed by the Ministry of Racial Equality headed up by Aniele Franco. Asked what place Black men currently occupy in the country, the sociologist said that the discussion has not been carried out from his point of view in the way that it should be. He says, most of the work on race relations today talks about Black people in general or about women, Black women. There are hardly any studies, at least in my fields, psychology and social science, on the male gender, he pointed out. If you look at the social economic indicators linked to the four main groups, white women and men, Black women and men, Black men have the worst educational indexes. They have the worst school dropout rates, life expectancy, and violence. What I want is for Black men to be a category of analysis, a category that has legitimacy to be studied, he added. Restier highlighted the absence of Black men as a focus in affirmative action policies. He says not only are Black women in these spaces, but they have taken precedence in actions developed by the MIR, again, the Ministry of Racial Equality, including exclusive policies without the due counterpart for men. The sociologist emphasized the importance of the advancement of Black women in society, but he said that it is necessary to debate this male gender, which is the most affected by this violence. If being at the bottom of the social pyramid means having less access to the right to life, Black men are at the bottom of the pyramid because they die the most. They have the lowest life expectancy, he said. I don't want to compete for who's on the bottom, who's at the top. I want to meet with the facts, the social phenomenon. Why? Because with that in hand, we have more clarity to resolve the issues of the Black population, he added. I don't know, what do we say about this? I hope this is something that people are willing to listen to. Hope it doesn't become like a very hostile type of debate, because both sides have to be heard. I know that this guy right here, I saw him on, I saw the post that he made on Instagram. He's the one who posted it on his page, and that I became aware of this interview with Restier. And so when he posted the article on his Instagram, it immediately got like 100 comments. So there was some back and forth going on. Most of the Black men who weighed in agreed with what Restier is saying. Like, where are the policies for us? A lot of people are accusing, like, look, you guys are using our numbers, us being murdered at an incredibly alarming rate, to forward advancement for Black women policies. There were some Black women who entered into discussion, and it became kind of like a debate going on in there. So I definitely want to follow this and see what comes out of this. What do people have to say? Is there any validity in what Restier is saying? So this guy right here, there was 100 comments on his Instagram under this picture. That's the last time I saw it. I haven't looked at it in the last few days, but he immediately responded to the article, and he says, what can a Black man with a doctorate say? Okay. So he goes by the name of Omiloji Agbada Dudu. So this is what he had to say in response to the article posted by Restier, reacting to Restier's interview with Folha de Sao Paulo. So he says, yesterday it caught my attention that the text by sociologist Henrique Restier, which spoke about the Ministry of Racial Equality's inconsistent public policies for Black men, was replaced by the simple, it's resentment. So already, the man puts the article out as he does an interview in the top newspaper, and it's called, people are reacting by saying it's resentment. He goes on, I heard criticism in every sense. It's dishonest. It doesn't match reality. And even that it would be a pain in the neck. So this is how people are reacting to the Restier interview. The intellectuality of a Black man, even with a doctorate degree, is worthless to these people who are among white supremacists. And what's wrong with a Black man also speaking from resentment? What I've seen most recently were Black feminist women saying barbaric things about Black men based on their resentments, which were legitimized. The famous Lelia Gonzalez, very famous anthropologist. She was a feminist back in the day. I think she died in '94, maybe. But she's one of the most important, professors, activists, anthropologists, and leaders to emerge of the Black movement. So Lelia Gonzalez taught us that we must speak with the emotion of our soul. Bell Hooks writes from her stories and experiences. Conceição Evaristo teaches us about the power of writing. Conceição Evaristo is one of the most popular Black women authors in Brazil these days. Those who taught intellectual Black men about the strength of their emotions were Black women. If they can be emotional, why can't we? Having possible elements of resentment should not nullify Henrique's provocative text, but rather be another door for dialogue. I agree that the text is insufficient. I mean, obviously, Henrique Restier he's up to a 4-part series right now, breaking down his argument on his Instagram page, just talking about this question of where is the output and the policies that need to be put forward and put in place for Black men. He has a 4-part series going on. Definitely have to look into that. So even though the text that I'm reading today may be insufficient, he's continuously putting up new material to back up his argument. There are still deeper aspects to be brought out, and for us to understand the complex dynamics regarding the demands of Black men and the projects that the Ministry of Racial Equality does not propose. We cannot, however, throw Black male intellectuals in the trash to defend a government institution from the criticism of a single Black male intellectual. This is cruel, it's perverse, it's violent, it's sickening, it's racist. And it contributes to the project, which is ongoing, of extermination of Black men, and for which this government itself bears a large share of the responsibility, for the takedown of just the loss of lives of just, thousands of Black men every year. Okay. So this is something I'm going to have to be keeping my eye on. I'm going to have to do a follow up to this piece because this is something that's been boiling under for a number of years. It's like nobody wants to pay attention to what Black men have to say about their own plight. Their lives are being used to push forward policies, but how do these policies speak to the plight of Black men? This is what the question that Henrique Restier is discussing, and I want to definitely in the future I'm gonna have to go more into this because, like I said, he's one of those voices that's going to come forward and it's going to be a challenge. Like, look, we need to have a discussion about this. What we seem to be missing here is that we can't have just one side moving forward. I look at this as it's like a plan. If you can wipe out Black men, then you'll just have Black women left. If the issue is Black people in Brazil moving forward, you can't move forward Black women without Black men and vice versa. It has to be both. So anyway, there's a lot that needs to be said about this particular article and the sociologist's opinion, but this is the first piece that I wanted to put out because I'm quite sure it's going to be a lot more people who's going to have something to say about this particular interview that he did. So curious to know what you thought about it. Definitely drop a comment in the comment section. Consider liking this video, sharing this video, subscribing to the channel. If you've seen more than a few videos that you find to be intriguing. If you like the information you're getting, consider dropping maybe a super chat, a super thanks, or even drop a couple dollars in my Cash App, which is $sign Mr. Marcus 72. That's MrMarques 72. And with that said, I'm going to end this video here and ask that you all come back to check out the next video that I post.